All right. Well, I'm Katie, the Russian founder of Plan B Passport. At Plan B Passport, we help individuals to obtain second citizenship from countries that I believe might be beneficial for them in various ways. Things like they offer a better tax regime, they offer more freedom to travel in some cases. In some cases, they generally offer more freedom, especially in the times like now, as what we see in the world that is going nuts. And I just believe that people really need to have a plan B, a second option, an exit plan to make those governments compete for them, right? So I don't want to, like, I want to diversify my risks in a way that if shit hits the fan in my country, if my government decides to go full authoritarian, I want to make sure that I have a second option ready to go, that I can just flee the country. And we see different events that's happening in the world right now, but we also Bitcoiners, and they don't necessarily like it. So in a scenario where they try to go after Bitcoiners, obviously they can 6102 us just because it's unconfiscatable asset, but they may be able to make our life harder. So in this scenario, they can revoke your passport and you won't be able to leave the country unless you give up your Bitcoin or pay huge taxes on that and all that stuff. But in scenario where you have a plan B option, you'll be like, bye Felicia, I'm out of here. So that's what we do at Plan B, just try to help people become more sovereign, limit their dependency on one particular state, and take advantage of this kind of competition between governments where they can offer you citizenship through donation options where you don't have to visit the island, you don't have to go there, you don't have to live there. You can just donate into sustainable growth fund of the country, get your passport, and sleep better at night.
So, which countries do you make contributions to that you can get a passport from?
I used to work with 30 different jurisdictions, but
Oh,
then due
wow.
to my audience interest as well as my philosophical alignment, I nailed it down to just seven. So 5 countries in the Caribbean, such as St. Kitts, Antigua, Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, as well as Vanuatu, an island nation next to Australia, and Portugal. Portugal is a little different program. It's not a passport program, it's a residency program. So you purchase real estate there and on this basis obtain a permanent residency.
Oh, wow. So, have you been to all these places that you're selling passports and
Not all of
residencies
them.
to?
Yeah,
Okay,
not all of them, but quite a few. Yeah. Planning my next trip. I'll try to make it happen either October or November this year.
nice. And do you, like, if someone comes to you and they're interested in this, do you also explain Bitcoin to them, or do they generally already understand the use cases for Bitcoin if they're looking for
My
something like,
audience, yeah, my audience is Bitcoiners. I try
okay,
not to work with anybody else. A few months back, I made it to mainstream media and I got a lot of leads that I felt a little uncomfortable working with.
mm,
I like our people. I like working with Bitcoiners. Uh, we're on the same page generally, and we have the same pains, we have the same mentality. So when they come to me, I know exactly what they mean, but by like trying to explain me their goals and needs and requirements in order,
mm,
like in the process of obtaining second passport. So I understand where they're coming from. I understand Bitcoin, I understand their pain, I understand how to help them, right? And they understand that I'm on the same philosophical page with them, so they kind of trust me a little more just because we're all orange pilled.
mhm. So how did this start for you? Did Bitcoin come first, or did you have
Kind
two
of,
passports in the beginning, or?
it came hand in hand, I would say, in a way. So I was always like libertarian or liberty minded, I would say. It came all the way back from my family. Back in 95, my dad was a city prosecutor, but he realized how broken the system is, quit it, and became an entrepreneur. And ever since, I was raised as somebody who's like questioning authority, not really falls into the system on default, etc., etc. So then at the age of 21, I immigrated to the States on my own. And I realized that like having multiple papers, I guess, like even multiple driver licenses or bank accounts in different countries can really benefit you in various ways. And what I realized that is beneficial the most is having a choice, right? Because now you can play by ear in which situation, which jurisdiction paper to use, and that really makes you feel better. So I started looking more into this concept, and I knew back then I was 21-year-old, didn't really make much money, but I knew there is like a bigger picture to that. If I can play this jurisdictional arbitrage on a tiny level, people probably scale that by now, and there's like a huge industry. So I found the flag theory, and I was like fascinated with the concept. Basically, you're stacking flags in different jurisdictions for different purposes, like maybe one of them is a better regulatory environment for your business. Another one provides you with better lifestyle while you tax resident in the third one where you actually pay your taxes, etc., etc. So I discovered this flag theory, and then there was this guy that I met in Miami. I was already a Bitcoiner at this point, and he was like, "Yeah, I sell passports." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is crazy! I've been looking into that. Tell me more." And at this point, he needed a Bitcoin advisor, basically somebody who would like explain him Bitcoin, because his clients were hitting him up with like how to accept payments, how to like they wanted to pay in Bitcoin, but he could not, like he didn't know how to make it happen. So I kind of helped him out on that. And then he was like, "You should just open your own company, because so we don't really compete. Our audience is pretty different. They speak different languages. They come from different pain points, etc." So he was like, "Yeah, Katie, go ahead and open your own company." I was like, "Hell yeah, I'm gonna open my own company." So this is how Plan B Passport been born.
Nice. So I was fortunate enough to be born with two passports, but for a lot of people, most of them come with a pretty hefty price. Like, what is the income level or economic situation of most of your clients?
Well, I would say it's somewhere around seven figures. Is where people feel comfortable getting the passport. And also, again, it depends on necessity, right? You may not have seven figures, but you're in real need to get the passport, which you always calculate your own risks and attack vectors. But for other people, they may have eight figures and be like, I'm fine. I don't really need to spend 180 grand on the passport right now. So it all comes with personal necessities, I would say.
Hmm. And how many clients around are you managing at one time? It's a long process, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's a pretty long process, but we streamlined the processes. We've been scaling a lot, so we're pretty capable to handle the current flow of clients that we have. I'm not going to be able to say the number, but we've
Mm-hmm.
been definitely growing, I would say, at 20% a month rate lately. So that's been pretty cool.
I would imagine since you accept Bitcoin for payment that in a bull market you might get a little more attention. Clients come
Definitely.
your way. Yeah.
All the stars came together this bull market. First, we had the COVID craziness started, right? So a lot of people were like, "Hey, I don't have as much freedom as I thought I had, so I might need the second passport." Then after that, we had election in the US, and half the country was unhappy with the results. Then now we have like Canada, Australia being like going really wrong way, in my opinion, and people realizing it. Europe mandating vaccination, and like all these things together with the bull market and Bitcoin. Yeah, that's been definitely good for my business. But I mean, it's not nice to say, but like all these things were really good for my business.
Yeah, I I think it's just important to recognize. Like similarly, I don't think Bitcoin would survive if governments didn't abuse their printing power. And just like, your business wouldn't be necessary if governments behaved
This is
well.
true.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting. So how many I mean, passport sellers are there out there? Are there any other people selling passports for Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of companies in the industry. I'm like, I have no problem saying that I'm probably the most educated Bitcoiner amongst them. And a lot of my clients come to me and like, I've been to the biggest industry player. I tried to talk to him. I tried to talk to a couple other companies. They just don't get it. And I'm like, well, I'm your huckleberry, you know.
That's funny. So going forward, where do you see kind of like Bitcoin and this like government overreach, as many would say? Um, how do you see this playing out the rest of this year, at least in terms of your business, but also just generally?
Yep. Um, Depends on which country you're coming from to begin with. Like some countries just in a huge need of getting a passport, while others are somewhat free in a way. But the same we can say about Bitcoin, right? Like Venezuelans really need Bitcoin more than I do probably, but who am I to judge? Like we all need Bitcoin a lot. Just some of us at the point where it's like such a necessity that it's basically a life saving thing. And the same with passports, I would say. I feel like we're all talking about Sovereign Individual, one of the best books that I've ever read. And like they talk a lot about the digital currency that is going to be introduced to us, not through any particular state, but it's going to be run by people, et cetera, et cetera. So we already got Bitcoin. And the flag theory or obtaining second passports is basically from the chapter of nation state going down simply because they can't sustain this competition. We're defunding them basically in a way, right? We're defunding them through Bitcoin and we're defunding them through voting with our feet. So we vote with our money with Bitcoin, we vote with our feet with flag theory and obtaining different passwords that is better for my taxes, is better for my lifestyle and for my freedom. So we are the ones making the sovereign individual thesis play out faster. Like we are front running everybody else on this trend, and I think it's pretty cool. So that's how Bitcoin philosophy and second passport philosophy really go hand in hand in my head. And there are a lot of other things that I also think needs to be part of it, such as unschooling, like sovereign approach to health, um, 3D2A, etc., etc.
What is 3D2A?
3D printing for guns. It stands
Oh,
for
oh, yeah,
3D
yeah.
Second Amendment. Yeah.
Oh, Second Amendment. Okay, yeah, I hear you. So for Bitcoiners, at least as far as I've seen, tend to be single issue voters. So what issue or issues tends to bring people to your door the most?
Mm. I would say again, depends on what country you're coming from. A lot of it is taxes. We are like we were smart enough to buy Bitcoin back in the day. Why the fuck am I supposed to pay 40% on that to you if you did everything to make it hard for me to buy Bitcoin? Like you were
Mm.
preventing me from making me this money, but I still owe you 40% of it. Like what the actual fuck? And in other cases, it's visa-free travel. So me coming from Russia originally, on my passport, I could not go anywhere. I could not go to Europe. I could not come to the US. I was denied in United States visa at first, so I wasn't able to fly when I wanted to. I basically couldn't go anywhere. So for many people, it's just like, hey, I want to be able to travel without going through a shit ton of bureaucracy every time and 3 weeks of wait for my visa. So I want passport for that. Um, for Australians right now, it's a simple way to escape their country because they can't leave unless they have an exemption. And being a foreign citizen who is living in Australia is one of the exemptions. So that could be another one.
Like if someone is just looking into Bitcoin for the first time, do you think they should also start researching some of this flag theory and looking into getting a second passport?
I would say it's a rabbit hole on its own. And I believe Bitcoin rabbit hole will necessarily bring you to a passport rabbit hole for sure. It's just one comes after another. Sometimes it comes a different way. You first start, hedging against your government, and you realize that, oh shit, one of the best hedges I have is not just having passports, but also getting into Bitcoin, because that's how I can flee the country, and that's how I can have like a real security, because how did it basically, yeah, unconfiscatable asset.
Hmm. So, what do you think then about the exit tax in the United States and Bitcoin? Like, what's the contingency plan there?
I think that Bitcoiners really need to unite on this, and we are pretty good at making things viral and fight the things that we thought were unfightable. So in 2018, there was a proposed bill on actually ending the citizenship-based taxation in the United States. So what is citizenship-based taxation is when no matter where your income comes from, no matter where you live, you have to file taxes in the US. Only two countries in the world have citizenship-based taxation. It's United States and East African country called Eritrea. And like because of this rule, you can't simply vote, like, they say love it or leave it, but you can't really live it in the US because you first have to pay 40% of all your assets exit tax. On top of it, you can't actually renounce your US citizenship now to avoid citizenship based taxation because they just suspended this service in all foreign embassies due to COVID. So embassies work, all the services they still provide, but the renunciation services is not like it's not in the play right now. So I believe COVID has nothing to do with that. The numbers of people renouncing US citizenship has been skyrocketing in the last 5 years, and they just don't know what's going on. And people keep thinking that, like, well, United States has a lot of income in immigration, but it's crazy to see how much outcoming, like expatriation, it has too. So maybe they started to realize that it's not okay. So I would want people to look into this 2018 proposed bill of ending citizenship-based taxation. And I actually made a tweet thread about it about a month and a half ago. So if you want to check it out, I tweeted the PDF to that as well. Please go check it out, make it viral.
So that's interesting. That's true. I feel like the people leaving the United States is like somewhat of a suppressed statistic. So can you tell me more about that? Because I guess in my mind, I always thought, well, if you were to renounce your citizenship, you just quit, right? You just leave and just stop paying. But that probably doesn't work like that. So what does that process look like when it's actually functioning?
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't. So in other countries, what you could do, let's say Canada or Australia, just to give you an easier example, English-speaking countries too, um, you can just become a non-tax resident of those countries. So you're telling them that, hey, I'm no longer using your benefits, therefore I'm not going to pay for them, right? Pay for them. It's almost like taxes actually pay for them. But basically, you can become a non-tax resident of those countries quite easily. In the United States, it's not the case. So, for example, just to give you some numbers, in 2008, there was 235 renunciations. In 2010, it was 1,500. And last year, 2020, it was 6,700 people who renounced their citizenship. So like we have
Oh,
huge growth in the numbers. And if they didn't suspend the process of renunciation, people would still be able to do that. And this year we would see like crazy numbers. I bet we would see a different number.
yeah, that's exponential growth. That's fascinating. So does Lightning play in, or are you trying to incorporate Lightning into any of your services, the Lightning Network?
Not in the moment, just because average check is quite high and people are totally fine with on-chain fees for that. And on-chain fees are not that high at all right now. So when you're sending a 10 grand transaction, it's nothing basically. But I'm a huge fan of Lightning. I'm a big user of it for sure.
Oh, nice. Uh, I would imagine your work gives you a lot of insight into central banking. So, do you follow kind of like Russian politics still? Like, do you?
I'm trying to. Well,
Yeah.
me and my dad try, like we trying to catch up. He's watching American news in Russian basically, so he's watching what Russia says about America. I'm telling him what America says about Russia, and then we catching up on that because it's kind of fun. Yeah, so just this week, banking rates, like loan rates in Russia, went up 1.5% just this week. And I was like, what? Okay. And their loan, like the mortgage in Russia is already 20%. It's crazy to imagine. But
Mhm.
at the same time, we always had a high inflation. But like that's probably what gave me another perspective on Bitcoin. That's why it was somewhat easy for me to grasp the need for Bitcoin because like throughout my lifetime, I've seen two hyperinflations. And like I'm not old at all, so it's been quite a roller coaster for my family in Russia.
So it seems to me that decentralization is the solution to like a lot of humanitarian problems on like the monetary front, but kind of your business is giving me insight also just into a personal one,
Yeah,
right?
it's really interesting. So I have clients from all over the world, right? And like knowing their perspective. For example, only two countries out of all my clients come to me and say, "Hey, I don't really have problems with taxes, but I still want to get out." And I thought it was interesting because nobody says it. But Netherlands and South Africa clients, they're like, "Yeah, my taxes are okay," and I'm like, "Interesting, never heard it before." While others are like, I just need to get out. Yes, my taxes suck and I want to get a better tax regime. But as of now, I just need to be out of here. I need my whole family out of here,
Mhm.
including my parents, my kids, my sister. Everybody needs to get out. And I'm like, this is crazy. So it's really interesting to like, I don't watch much news at all. Basically, Twitter is what Twitter is my source of news these days mostly. But like my clients really give me perspective on what's going on the ground. And like as I find out from which part of the country they are, they will tell me more perspective on that. Like for example, East Australia is absolutely nuts. West Australia, like, we're chilling. We can't leave the country, but there's no lockdowns here. So like all this stuff is pretty interesting.
I didn't know that. Are they governed? Are they two different states?
I think they do have different states, but it's just the west part of the country is like kind of more rural.
Mhm.
So Melbourne is absolutely nuts, but what's going on in Perth, for example, in Australia, seems like much more chill.
So, how do you go about finding the right place for people? Do you recommend that people move to rural areas, or do you have any say in where they go? Because I'd imagine you have to establish residences, and you're working with possibly realtors. I don't know. How does that
Hmm.
work?
So that point mostly comes from their like lifestyle perspective. When they come to me, we have a Zoom call, we strategize together on what is the best jurisdictions, and like the kind of the basic rules that basic criteria that I give them to find the right jurisdiction is like, let's talk about tax regime. Let's figure out if capital gains is your most biggest concern, or is it income tax, etc. Let's figure out how many dependents you want to include in your applications, because different countries will provide you with different price. So like one country can be the best for single applicant, but it will be super expensive for a family of four. So depending on that, we'll strategize as well. Do you care or not about visa-free travel? Because let's say with Canadian passport, you wouldn't really care much because you already have access to most of the world. So that wouldn't be a concern. But if you're coming from Russia, definitely. And then timeline. A lot of people are in a rush, so we need to look at what is the processing time or different jurisdictions, because they do have their own due diligence process after you submit the application. And some of them take 3 months, while others take 8 months. So if you're in a rush, I would exclude a couple of countries. And then we talk about the lifestyle that you're trying to obtain. Like, are you considering actually living on the island, or is it just a plan B? Would you be interested in like just establishing your tax residency there while still traveling the world, et cetera, et cetera? And what are the main values for you in terms of lifestyle, like education for kids locally, or do you just want a nice villa on the beach, or like we'll just chat about it, understand your values, understand your concerns, and based on that, strategize.
Sounds like a lot of your job is research then, or do you already have like a really good understanding of all the islands and where in the islands or countries people should live?
I definitely do. At this point, like 30-minute consultancy is usually enough for us to figure out what you want, what I
Yeah.
have in stock. And like after that, it's just a couple of emails to confirm this and that, to go over the numbers, to go over the processing time as well as paperwork. And then we're ready to jump in.
Yeah. So do people, I'd imagine you'd have to provide like quite a lot of paperwork. What do you do if people fall short of some of that or simply don't have it? You just can't help them, or how does that work?
Well, then we just have to request the documents. At this point, like I have pretty solid legal team working with paperwork, and we already work with so many jurisdictions that at some, like in many cases, we know which form they need from their country, and they never heard of this form, but we did because we already worked with that. So things are like military records or birth certificates, or your first marriage, divorce letters, like all this stuff needs to be collected. And we either point you in the right direction where you can request those documents. In some cases, we can help you obtain those. But most of it is coming from your side because, those are our original documents that we never want to touch even. So a lot of your attention would be needed too.
So shifting gears a little bit, you said that you service exclusively Bitcoiners. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin maximalism? Is it a
Um,
feature or a bug or?
but I would consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist, um, definitely. And like, I believe that's the mentality of my clients in most cases. Again, my only marketing channel is my Twitter, right?
Mhm.
Twitter, podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, my audience come through the same signal. And if they're aligned with me on Twitter, we'll probably be able to find the right approach for their password, and like between my business and their password, because I believe our business is pretty authentic in terms of comparing myself with other people in the industry. And so I like to work with Bitcoiners. I do work with a lot of maxis. Most of my clients are maxis, I would say. Um, yeah, I believe it is a feature, not a bug, for sure.
Yeah, I do as well. I think it functions something like an immune system
Yeah.
because especially when you're talking about people's money, I think there's like a high likelihood of scammers like crawling into all aspects of the network if you don't have this really robust kind of like group of vigilantes ready to call them
Exactly.
out on Twitter.
And
Yeah.
then like they compromise, like every altcoin is compromising something. It's either the decentralization point, which is, huge thing,
Hmm.
or it's issuance or something else. And once they compromise it, we can't advocate for what we believe in anymore because we just gave up something really important, one of our first principles. And in this scenario, like, why do we even care?
Yeah. It seems to me that flag theory would have a lot in common with or be fall under um, the wing of game theory. So, do you have thoughts about the game theory of mining or of different countries. Edward Snowden just recently called to nations. I mean, basically to just, hey, consider
Start
getting into,
stacking.
yeah, start sacking, or you're gonna really miss out. What do you think about the nation play there?
Lately, I've been noticing this trend, like especially now in times of COVID, it's kind of you can see it through Zoom almost. If you look at the countries who's been the most authoritarian, let's say 30, 40 years ago, they're pretty free now. Like look at Russia, Belarus. There's no lockdowns, no mandatory vaccinations, no special rules because the society is basically like not ready to give up any of their powers anymore, and they basically have this default fuck you mentality to government. And like when government try to pull up another card of authoritarian regime, they're like, good fucking luck. Like we've seen it 30 years ago, we're not gonna fall for it ever again. So it basically falls into strong good times create weak man creates bad times create strong man. So I bet that Russia is gonna thrive in 10 years from now, while a lot of Western countries who's been living a good life will be like, holy shit, what did we allow our governments to do? Well, and probably countries like Venezuela and Lebanon are gonna thrive 30 years from now because they've seen a lot of shit now. So that's kind of interesting to see those swings, because it's not about governments being good or being bad. It's about people who let their governments be good or bad. So if you've seen a lot of bad, you're not gonna let it happen anymore, and you can push back. In countries that don't push back, see a lot of shit. So like in Australia, they've been living really good quality life for a while, and now 76% of people totally support this complete lockdown and mandatory vaccination. And you're like, guys, I don't think you know history enough, or like you let the right thing happen right now. So
Yeah,
that's pretty sad.
yeah, yeah. I have a feeling, I've never been to Australia, but I have a feeling that what's portrayed in the media is, information, like digital information, can never represent reality, right? So I won't say I understand what's going on there, but it seems like an awfully complacent populace for what's happening. But I wonder if some of the pushback is being covered up or just underreported.
Yeah, mainstream media is pretty bad these days. But just a couple of weeks ago, I was at Bitblock Boom conference, which Bitcoin Magazine actually sponsored.
Mhm.
So and Stefan Livera, who recently left Australia, told us a lot about what's going on the ground. And that was like, okay, I trust this guy and I trust his information from the ground. And that's basically the only way to collect information right now. It's all about trust, and it's all about I trust you, you've seen it, so I'm going to trust that instead of just trusting somebody who is misincentivized to show a particular piece of a video that doesn't really represent the what's going on there. And like all the mainstream media are now have wrong incentives. They are
Mhm.
paid by somebody who has their hidden interest in there. So that's basically, I didn't have a TV in like 6 years, and I don't mind.
Yeah, me neither. I don't. Actually, it's
Yeah.
very strange to go back and watch TV if you haven't seen it in a couple years. It's like, how do people watch? This is unwatchable. This is
Yeah. You walk into somebody's house and like TV's on the background and it's always noisy. And you're like, geez, like you really consume a lot of information that is complete garbage.
yeah, it's almost. It wouldn't be so bad if they're like sitting there, sort of like parsing the information, but I think it is like the passive consumption of information can cause some problems. Like even passively having like maybe like a podcast on all day and night, I'll notice like, oh, it's not really my thoughts. I'm kind of like taking on,
Yeah.
like what I'm listening to.
It's true. It's definitely true. And then all the advertisements make you fall into consumerist mentality, because you just really need this one thing that you never thought of before, because TV just tells you from all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, Bitcoin luckily is like a pretty good shield against consumerism.
That's true. That's true. Low
Yeah.
time preference.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most bullish thing happening in Bitcoin right now?
Well, today's what, September 10th, just a couple days ago, we've seen El Salvador going live with Bitcoin legal tender. I thought it was pretty cool. But honestly, Bitcoiners around me make me the most bullish because, like, I understand how we are on the same page, and like many of us saying that, like, damn, if I didn't have Bitcoin right now, my life really would be a little more depressing. And like seeing this as a hope for all of us, and just like believing in a bright future. Like all of us had one of the best years of our lives in 2020, when anybody outside of Bitcoin had like an absolute nightmare of a year. And you're like, damn, just this one thing makes you believe the life is beautiful, makes you change, kind of adjust your needs in the moment, adjust your priorities, and boom, your life is beautiful. Like, how cool is that? Absolutely bullish.
Yeah. Is there ever a bear market for you? Are there ever times when you question the craziness that is going all into Bitcoin?
Definitely not. Like the bear market, no. And like, if like at this point, many people just don't look at the price. Like we're checking it once in a while, but it really does not affect your emotions anymore, because you're like, yeah, I'm stacking anyway. Like, what's the point? So once you realize that you're not stacking until any particular moment in life, and then you start living, but you're already living the best life you can while still stacking, you really stop caring about the price, and you're like, holy shit, life is beautiful. I have my savings in the best asset possible. My life is awesome too. And I don't leave like, yeah, we talk about delayed gratification and low time preference, but it doesn't mean that our life sucks right now in order to not suck in the future. It already is beautiful now, but we just making sure it's gonna get better and better and better. So I don't have bear markets anymore. Life is beautiful.
Yeah, if you price your world in Bitcoin, I guess
That's,
you really
yeah,
don't. I mean, if you're not selling, it's only getting better for you.
yeah.
And that's a really good outlook, I think, just in because if you're really in this and you really understand it, you kind of realize that pricing Bitcoin in dollars, of course, is kind of priming yourself to eventually make a trade, right? Like if I think it's fair to say we'd both be pretty excited if Bitcoin went to $100,000 today, but it's kind of dangerous to get excited about this because at what price do you crack, and starts.
Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah. Still, like in Bitcoin, once you realize the first principles with money, you then realize the first principles in life, and you really shape your priorities and like your dreams in a different way. And like, you don't dream about Lambos anymore. You really dream about the chicken coop on your backyard. And it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. And it doesn't require too many sets to build a chicken coop.
Yeah, that's true. So what kind of like ways has it changed you personally then? Like over how many years have you been stacking Bitcoin?
4 years now, I would say.
Hmm.
Again, I like, I wouldn't say it changed me too much, because I was coming from like freedom-minded family, and I was a professional athlete back in the day, which kind of also coming from like sovereign lifestyle. Like I was a professional sailor, so like
Oh,
the most censorship resistant travel that exists in the world, I'm pretty good at it. And I've traveled the world a lot. I'm an immigrant myself, so like the default distrust to government was with me since I was very young. Traveling the world and looking for a better lifestyle, kind of, implementing the capitalist competition between the nation states was also the thing for me always. I would say it made me stronger in my beliefs, just because, again, I met my tribe, and I realized that I'm not the crazy one. It's a lot of us, and we are actually right, and we're winning. So that was pretty cool, and it exposed me to a lot of new topics that I was not exposed to. Interestingly enough, I was somehow like still following them even as a child. Like, I'm a huge advocate on unschooling right now, or homeschooling, just because public education sucks. But like, my parents, we never really talked about homeschooling or unschooling, but I would only go to school 4 months out of a year because I was a national team. And like, I would I would just do my homework at home with my mom. She would help me with math. My dad would help me with history, literature, and everything. So I was basically homeschooled, but not because it was part of our philosophy in a way, but just because of necessity. And I remember days when I would just wake up and I was tired. I was like, Mom, I really don't want to wake up and go to school. She's like, oh, fuck it, just stay home. Like, who cares? So like, she somehow had this mentality without knowing about unschooling, homeschooling, or the wrong like brainwashing that public education gives me. So that was cool too. I was raised in a family of hunter. Like, my dad is a huge hunter. He's fishing, he's hunting. So I was raised around guns. I would shoot guns since I was probably like 8 or something. That was part of my life too. And like, all these pieces, they were magically already in my childhood, and now they just grew stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm hosting little conferences here and there. Like, I hosted one before Bitcoin 2021. I hosted one before Big Block Boom, and it's basically all the things that Bitcoiners are interested in outside of Bitcoin. So like, we're talking about unschooling, 3D2A again, passwords. We're talking about farming and gardening, permaculture and stuff. We're talking about sovereign approach to your health, or home birth, like all these things that I consider to be part of Bitcoiner mentality, but not necessarily something that Bitcoiners are exposed to. So like, I was happy, I was lucky to be exposed to those topics, and now I want to bring it to other Bitcoiners as well.
It seems like you would have a lot of insight into seasteading. Are you interested in that at all?
Maybe, not sure about that. I definitely am interested in like being able to flee the country at any point without uh, any anybody knowing about it. So like, I'm in Texas currently. Before that, I was in Florida, so I had direct access to the ocean, so I can jump in a boat and go somewhere else. Basically, again, censorship resistant travel, and on the way, I might have a boating accident or two. Um, so
Just to arrive and to start fresh somewhere else.
yeah, but I had so many boating accidents in my life, even before being a Bitcoiner, that it's even funny.
Like real ones.
Yeah, like real ones.
That's terrifying to me. I guess to close, do you have any price predictions? Are you like a futures person? Do you
Not
have
really.
no thoughts
Really,
besides?
I don't even think about what the price is going to hit this year. I don't think what price is going to be 4 years from now. The number is going to go up. How quickly, I don't know. And I just hope that it's not gonna go up as quick as it. Like, I don't want it to go quicker than I feel comfortable with stacking, because that's gonna be hard. Like, damn it, my business doesn't provide me with as many sets as it used to. Kind of sucks. So I'm pretty young. I want to work. I want to stack sats. I want to raise my family on Bitcoiner mentality, and that's about it. Bitcoiner is going to be the only one very soon. We're not going to price it in dollars anymore, and that's what I'm here for.